What if every single thing that ever happened to you, the good, the bad, all of it, was just raw material for your life's work? It's a pretty wild idea, right? Well, that's just one of the profound concepts we're diving into today, straight from the mind of the literary giant Jorge Luis Borges. We're going to unpack his famous interview with Roberto Alifano, and hey, if you're studying this for a class, think of this as your ultimate guide. Let's get right into it. Borges, he was so much more than a writer. He was like a philosopher of the page. His work is legendary for its mazes and its dreamlike logic. And this interview, well, it's our map into that incredible mind. It shows us how his own personal struggles, like his eventual blindness, literally shaped his views on art, on memory, and on why he believed that books are absolutely essential for our survival as a species.
All right, so here's our roadmap for exploring Borges's world. We're going to start with his early years, then get into his whole philosophy of using life as raw material, and then we'll wrap up with his powerful, and I mean powerful, defense of the book itself.
So to really understand a mind like Borges, you have to start at the beginning. You have to look at the library of his life, because his ideas weren't just abstract thoughts. They grew right out of his personal history, starting with his very first memories of reading. Alifano's first question is so simple. What was your first reading? But Borges's answer tells you everything you need to know. He says he wasn't really educated by school, but by his father's library. Think about that. For him, books weren't homework. They were the actual architecture of his entire world. Then the conversation turns to his mother, Donna Leonor. And he talks about this really powerful kind of universal guilt that we often just take our mothers for granted. We treat them like the sun or the moon. They're just there, and we only truly see their importance when they're gone. It's a perfect example of how Borges could take a personal feeling and turn it into this deep, shared human truth. And that idea, finding universal meaning in your own experience, it leads us right into one of his most famous concepts. When Alifano asks him about the blindness that took over his life at age 55, Borges's response isn't about tragedy at all. It's about perspective. His answer is just remarkable. He doesn't call his blindness a terrible fate. He just calls it a way of life that is not entirely unhappy. Now, this isn't just him being optimistic. This is the very foundation of his entire artistic philosophy. And here it is. This is the key takeaway, especially if you're taking notes. For an artist, nothing is ever wasted. Every humiliation, every setback, even something as profound as his blindness, it was all just raw material. It's like clay, given to the artist to be shaped into something new. It's the act of turning personal suffering into timeless art. So now we get to the real heart of the interview. Borges brings up a quote from George Bernard Shaw, and he uses it as a launchpad to explain his deep, almost spiritual reverence for books. He argues their true magic lies way beyond whatever the author thought they were doing. For Borges, a book isn't just a static object. It's a living, breathing vessel for time itself. He believed that when you read an ancient book, you're not just reading words on a page. You are, in a very real sense, reading all of the time that has passed since that book was written. You're creating this direct connection across centuries. How cool is that? Okay, so from the sacredness of the book, Alifano asks Borges to define something even more slippery: poetry. Borges basically admits it's impossible, right? It's like trying to define the color yellow or love. You can't really do it without making it smaller than it is, but he makes this one really critical distinction. And this is just brilliant. Borges argues that the poem itself, the actual words on the page, is just a series of symbols. The real magic is what he calls the poetic act. It's that spark, that moment of connection between the writer's mind and the reader's mind. And if that spark doesn't happen, if the reader feels nothing, well, then for Borges, the poetry has failed. And to show exactly what he means by this poetic act, he brings up this incredible line from Emily Dickinson. The idea that we all turn to dust, that's a common idea, almost a cliche. But Dickinson, she makes it magical, and she does it with a very precise choice of words. And this just nails his point perfectly. Look, if Dickinson had written men and women, the line would have been flat, totally forgettable. But by choosing gentlemen and ladies, she gives dignity, history, and this surprising tenderness to the image of death. That tiny choice, that is where the poetic act happens. So, from the power of a single word, Borges zooms way, way out. He argues that underneath all the endless variety in literature, there are really just a handful of core essential metaphors that have existed since the dawn of time. And here they are: time as a river, life as a dream, death as sleep. For Borges, these aren't just clever tricks writers use. He saw them as fundamental patterns in the way we all think. The real job of the poet isn't to invent brand new metaphors, but to find new and powerful ways to express these ancient essential ones.
Okay, this brings us to the grand finale, the most famous part of this entire interview. Alifano asks Borges if all the modern developments in communications, what we now call the internet, social media, all of it, will finally make books disappear. And Borges' answer is a very firm, very definitive no.
And this is his most powerful argument. Borges says that almost all human inventions are just extensions of our physical bodies. A telescope is an extension of our eyes. A sword is an extension of our arm. But the book, he argues, the book is totally unique. It's the only invention that is an extension of our mind, specifically our imagination and our memory. And that leads him to this absolutely stunning conclusion. Books are the great memory of all centuries. They aren't just objects. They are the irreplaceable tool that connects us to our past, and because of that, connects us to ourselves. If we lose books, we lose history. And if we lose history, we lose what it means to be human.
So I'll leave you with this to think about. What book is an extension of your memory? What story holds a piece of your history? Borges' final point, really, is that as long as human beings have memories and dreams, we will always, always need the one invention that was created just to hold them. Thanks so much for joining me.